Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Garrity on vacation this week. Rob Long in for Jim today. Rob, of course, is the contributing editor at National Review Online, but he is also the co-founder of Ricochet, host of the Martini Shot, co-host of the Glop podcast, and we love having him sub when Jim is out of town. And so we got good, bad, and crazy martinis today, Rob, and it's always a good sign when your political opponents are trying to do their very best to convince voters they're not like those other Democrats. We see that sometimes with Republicans, depending on the politics of the state. I'm guessing that's pretty much how Susan Collins runs things when she's running for re-election. But we see it in red states when Democrats are surprisingly competitive in a red state. I'm not like that other one. Jim and I like to joke of, oh, this is a Democrat who wears cowboy boots, or he drives a pickup. He's different. And so Axios out with a good story today, Alexi McCammon, about how Democrats in tough areas for Democrats to run, especially statewide, kind of running away from being Democrats. Congressman Tim Ryan, who's about as populist as you get right now on the Democratic side, running for Senate in Ohio. 3-minute ad launching his Senate campaign, never mentioned once that he's a Democrat. They also talk about a Democrat named Monica Tranel. Maybe it's Tranel. She is running for Congress in Montana, which due to the census will now have 2 congressional seats starting after the next congressional election. And in her ad, she says, so many people I grew up with don't vote for Democrats anymore. They feel like Democrats look down on rural America. And so that's largely true in a lot of places, so they're trying to claim that they're a different kind of Democrat. Hot Air has jumped in on this story as well, pointing out that the polls are looking very good for Republicans on issues that the Democrats claim are not real issues, like critical race theory, the situation with our schools, possibly transgender policy, and so forth. But CRT seems to be the big one that the Democrats want to run away from, but the public is not. So, Rob, how fun is it to watch the Democrats pretend they're not really Democrats?
You know, it's always fun, right? It's always fun to watch politicians squirm. That's what, is one of our few joys of being citizens is watching our politicians squirm. But it shows that there's something happening in the country, and you can see it where I live in New York City. Eric Adams, who was a police captain, African-American police captain, is going to be the next mayor of New York City. And he ran on law and order. He didn't run on to fund the police. He didn't run on CRT. He ran on law and order, and he won in the outer boroughs by convincing mostly, non-white voters that he wasn't, insane. And I think that's like, the bedrock truth about American politics is if you want to win an election, you just have to seem a little less crazy, a little more normal than your opponent. I used to say that you want to become president, the trick to becoming president is you've got to act like a human being for just 10 seconds longer than your opponent. And that as long as the Democrats are running away from weird and towards normal, I think it'll be successful in a lot of areas, but it should be an indication to them that there's a deeper institutional problem with their party, right? That their party is just kind of weird and kind of not normal. That's not a recipe for success, the ballot.
It's not, but we see this all the time when one party gets control. We saw it in after 2004. Bush narrowly defeats Kerry, but it's a 55-45 Senate for the GOP, and they hold the House. Bush says he's got a mandate. They try to reform Social Security. Crash and burn. 2006, obviously the Democrats win both the House and the Senate, and Obama wins big in 2008. Flash forward to 2008, Obama wins the presidency handily. He's got a filibuster-proof Senate for a little while until Scott Brown wins. He's got a big majority in the House. They get out over their skis. They think everybody loves what they want to do. But this time, it's even weirder because, Biden barely won. They talk about, of course, all the fighting over what happened with the election. But, the 3 or 4 states that made the difference, very, very, very close. 50-50 Senate. It's like a 4 or 5 seat swing in the House. And the Democrats are acting like all of America voted for this radical agenda. I can't imagine a more tone-deaf response to the last election.
No, especially when you think that the last election should have been a walk for Biden. I mean, it really should have been. He was running against a statistically by the polls unpopular and divisive incumbent in the middle of a financial and health crisis. So he really should have. Biden's Mr. Gray down the middle. They really should have won by more. The fact they didn't, it was a sign. And even people in the Democratic Party know this, that their agenda was too radical, too bizarre, too academic left. Those are two words you don't want to put together. That's when you start defunding the police and doing a lot of other crazy stuff.
And we're about to see their infrastructure bill crash and burn because they got too aggressive with what they wanted in it. They tried to do a bait and switch with bipartisan support for that, and then ramming through a much more expensive thing with all their other wish lists. And it just looked to be in bad faith. They don't even know what they want in the bill, but they know they want to spend trillions and trillions of dollars. And so what they thought was going to be three big bills might only turn out to be one. And let's hope that that's the case.
Yeah, one small one.
No, it wasn't a small one. It was $2 trillion. But, trillions these days, we just toss that number around like it's nothing. So it's crazy, utterly crazy. But speaking of getting debts under control, it's not going to happen in Washington anytime soon. Certainly not with Democrats in control. But as we learn, when Republicans have control of everything, they tend to forget about it too. But you know what happens? The bank doesn't forget about it when it's your debt. The government has a few different options. But when it comes to your student debt, there is an important way to get help, and that's with Earnest. Because look, it's time to break out of that student debt cycle, and Earnest can help you by refinancing your student loan. Times are tough, and worrying about those student loan payments doesn't make things any easier. So say goodbye to stressful student loan payments and take charge of your future with Earnest.
Earnest offers low-rate student loan refinancing, and you can check your rate risk-free in just 2 minutes. With Earnest, you get radically flexible payments, and you can pick your loan term. By refinancing, you can reduce your loan term, save money, or combine multiple loans into a simple monthly payment. And if you have questions, you can even talk to a real, live human being at Earnest for help, which is insane. Why were they a real life human being? Imagine that. So isn't it time you stopped feeling overwhelmed by your student debt?
Absolutely. So now Earnest is giving our 3 Martini Lunch listeners a $100 bonus. Refinance your student loans at earnest.com/martini. Terms and conditions do apply. But once again, you get a $100 cash bonus when you visit earnest.com/martini to refinance your student loan. Not available in all states. And once again, terms and conditions apply. All right, Rob, let's talk about another issue that could be rearing its head in this year's gubernatorial races, perhaps in Virginia and New Jersey, but certainly next year's midterms, and that's the rising cost of stuff, especially everyday stuff at the store, stuff at the gas pump, stuff you need. If you're doing any construction on your house, you know what the price of lumber is doing right now. It's insane. Composite's less expensive than lumber right now. Never seen that before. But the bad news is getting even worse because this isn't going to stop anytime soon. Wall Street Journal reporting today that Americans should brace themselves for several years of higher inflation than they've seen in decades, according to economists who expect the robust post-pandemic economic recovery to fuel brisk price increases for a while. Economists surveyed this month by the Wall Street Journal raised their forecasts of how high inflation would go and for how long compared with their previous expectations in April. The respondents on average now expect a widely followed measure of inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy components, to be up 3.2% in the fourth quarter of 2021 from a year before. They forecast the annual rise to recede to slightly less than 2.3% a year in 2022 and 23. So basically what they're saying is we haven't seen inflation like this since 1993, the very end of Bush 41, beginning of Clinton. And so 2 takeaways here, Rob. The rosy picture that people are painting in Washington and beyond because, they want a Democratic president to look good. The facts aren't lining up. And secondly, if the experts have to revise this drastically 3 months after their most recent projections, don't necessarily take the experts' projections to the bank long term.
Yeah, also remember there's a total disconnect between the inflation that people experience in their day and the inflation that they plan for and prepare for and that matters to them, and the inflation that the government says is part of their consumer price index or whatever. I mean, individuals have been experiencing inflation for a while. If you try to send a kid to college, if you want health care, which are 2 important things you got to pay for, you've experienced a lot of inflation. despite the fact that the government's telling you that there isn't any inflation. So these chickens are going to come home to roost. The problem with inflation is it's sort of lagging. And it's like, when you put on a few pounds here and there, they're really hard to get off. And it's hard. It's like you got to sweat them off. And the austerity and the Volcker plan that sort of killed inflation in the late 70s, early 80s was deeply painful to the economy. Necessary to do, but deeply painful. So it really is a sign of like, the sooner we take care of it now, the easier it's going to be and the less painful it's going to be. But it's awfully hard to take care of inflation when you're sending people checks every week, or have been, and you're about to spend $2 trillion. The truth is that inflation is really, really good for debtors, right? Because you pay your debts in cheaper money in the future. And so, there's a certain incentive if you're about to spend $2 trillion in the federal government to, a little inflation is okay. Problem is, there's no such thing as a little inflation. A little inflation then becomes a lot of inflation. And, we're going to pay the price, and it's going to be painful over the next, 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, well, we're racking up a ton of debt. So if there are any interest rate hikes, we're going to be in a world of hurt trying to pay that off. The thing I always find fascinating here is how we just chalk this up to the robust post-pandemic economic recovery. It's not that we've jacked, $6 or $7 trillion into the economy that we just conjured up out of thin air. Or in some cases, when you talk about energy prices, Biden cut off Keystone. He's going to lock down on exploration on federal lands. So, reducing supply, demand hasn't changed. In fact, it's going up as a result of the pandemic easing. And so guess what? Prices skyrocket. But we all just chalk it up to this magical economic recovery instead of looking at some specific factors.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strange thing when you're saying things like, well, everything's more expensive, and that's good. Okay, what a great, high-class problem to have. And that is simply not a high-class problem to have. We're much better off when prices are stable, and we're much better off when the economy is growing, and we're much better off when the government's not spending $2 trillion on nonsense. But that is unfortunately not the situation we're in, so we have to sort of figure out a way to prepare for the future, which I guess is going to be a little bit more complicated and probably a little more like the beginning of the 80s than any of us would prefer.
Yeah, probably the case. There was one headline early on after Biden took office, and it said, "The era of small government is over." And I'm thinking to myself, when was it here? There was at least a time when people talked about it, but the last time somebody actually did something about it when they got into power was probably right after the Republican Revolution in '94, when we temporarily got our fiscal house in a little bit of order. So, but it's been a long time for both parties.
It's been a long time. History comes back, and we're gonna relearn going to the supermarket and saying, "Oh my God, that bag of Doritos is that, or a pound of hamburger meats that's that was the 70s for us." And I think it's, as they say, even in fashion, the 70s are back.
All right. Well, we're not comfortable with these prices, but you can be comfortable with all the great products from MyPillow. Talked a lot about how much I love the pillow itself, the Giza Dream Sheets, but also the towel sets are fantastic. I keep the MyPillow towel set in place all the time, even when it's time to wash them. Get them right back up on the hook. They are huge, they are soft, they are fluffy, and they are fantastic towels. And nothing beats the feel of a luxurious towel, especially when you've jumped right out of the shower. And if that weren't enough, MyPillow right now is offering a really, really good deal.
Yeah, right now you get the 6-piece towel set, which is regularly $109.99. It's only $39.99. That's a 6-piece towel set. Each set is 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and a washcloth 2-pack. Made from proprietary technology that makes them highly absorbent, but they're still soft to the touch without that, lotiony weird feel some towels have. They're made with cotton grown right here in the USA, and they're available in a bunch of colors and sizes, machine washable, as you mentioned. And you get a 60-day money-back guarantee, a 1-year limited warranty, which is crazy for a pillow. Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great products, great guarantees. And, we're just talking about inflation. This is going the other way. This is a $70 savings. Fantastic stuff. So visit MyPillow.com, use the promo code Martini at checkout, or call 800-874-0104. The MyPillow 6-piece towel set for only $39.99. Now, while you're there, take advantage of the deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the Giza Dream bed sheets and the MyPillow premium pillows. Again, MyPillow.com, or call 800-874-0104. Well, so Biden was wrong about the economy. He's also wrong about the border. Remember at his what I think constitutes his one press conference so far during his administration. He had a lot of scripted questions, or at least he knew very clearly who was going to ask the questions, which is pretty typical in a press conference. And he was asked about the border because the crisis was already going then. This was late March. And he said, this is typical. This is seasonal. This is the time of year where a lot of people come to the border. Once it gets hotter, not as many people come, and this will all settle back down. Wrong. New York Post, more than 1 million illegal crossings of the U.S.-Mexico border will have been attempted over the first 7 months of 2021. Preliminary data indicates, defying expectations, that the illegal immigration crisis would ease as temperatures climbed. While U.S. Customs and Border Protection have yet to release the official number of border encounters that took place last month, man, that's getting late for that. The Washington Examiner reported that initial calculations put the total at 188,000, an increase of just over 4% from the more than 180,000 apprehended in May. If confirmed, the number of southwestern border stops would be the most in any month of June for at least 21 years. It would also be an 80% increase over the number of apprehensions in June of 2019, and way, way bigger than last year. But last year, of course, we had a pandemic. So Biden's clearly wrong. There's also apparently been no adjustment whatsoever in this policy, Rob, to mitigate this, other than maybe tweaking the facilities down there. But in terms of actually stopping the flow at the border, they either don't know what to do or they don't actually want to stop it.
Yeah, well, they know what to do. You have to have border enforcement. They just don't want to do that. I mean, the weird thing about this is that people seem to mistake the idea that if you don't like Trump, you may not like him, you may not like his policy solutions, but Trump didn't create a fake reality. There was always a crisis at the border. There was always a problem with people coming over and illegal immigration. That's been a problem that still needs to be solved. You may not like his solutions, but just because Trump said, some things are true, even if Trump said they're true. And we do have trouble at the border, and these guys are going to need to face that at some point, or we're just going to go right back to where we were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago with a real crisis at the border and more people coming over. And then the measures are going to have to be a lot more draconian than just more border enforcement or even a wall. It'll have to be much more deeper than that. And I have a feeling that these guys are just delusional. They just think that, well, if Trump said it, it can't be true, so we can just ignore it. And that just, unfortunately, is not the way the world works.
No, it's very simplistic, and it's kind of the way, going back to our first martini today, it's going to be their entire argument in 2022. You're not going to see very many substantive arguments against Republican candidates at all. It's going to boil down to, what's your relationship with Trump? And their gotcha question is going to be who won the 2020 election. That's going to be the entire Democratic argument against every Republican candidate.
And it's going to work in some places, but it's sad, bad for the country because we actually do need real solutions.
So as we have seen in all three martinis today, don't look to the Democrats to provide those. But we got a long track record of them not providing those solutions. But Rob, always great to have you with us. Thanks for being here the last couple of days, and I'm sure we'll talk again down the road.
Happy to do it. Rob
Long is a contributing editor at National Review Online. He's host of the Martini Shot. He's co-host of the Glob podcast. He's the co-founder of Ricochet. Busy guy. Always great to have him in for the vacationing Jim Garrity. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thank you for listening today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch and also tell your friends about us. Grateful for those 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Get us on those home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us all on Twitter. He's at RCBL for Rob Long, at Jim Garrity for Jim, and I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday, and please check us out again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
There's never a shortage of craziness going on in the news, and we're here to talk about it all. Richard Branson launches into space. People are freaking out as the COVID Delta variant is spreading, and inflation is on the rise as our economy tries to recover from the past year.
Hey, it's the Chicks here from the Chicks on the Right podcast. Download and subscribe to our daily podcast to hear us pick apart and pick on the news of the day. Politics to pop culture, nobody's safe, but it's all fun. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.